Stugotz, Ariel Helwani, I believe to be one of the finest sports journalists working anywhere. He is honorable, he is fair, he is perspective rich, and he went on Pablo Torre Finds Out and gave up the stories of all of the different ways that Dana White tried to bully journalism, did successfully bully journalism out of the ESPN building. But before we get to that, Pablo, I just want to point out what the lane that Dana White is taking now versus the lane he took 10 years ago, because he's seen the lane that profits off of being a professional asshole. Look at this. This is just a couple of weeks ago. This is Dana White basically defending his middleweight champion for hate speech.
Dana, I just want to go back. You were talking about, like, you obviously give a long leash to your fighters about, what they can say when they are up there with a UFC microphone, and you are getting into territory of homophobia, transphobia. Like, is there...
I don't give anybody a leash.
Well, I'm saying you...
A leash?
I'm like...
Free speech. Gonna control what people say? Gonna tell people what to believe? Gonna tell people... I don't tell any other human being what to say, what to think, and there's no leashes on any of them. What is your question?
I was asking that question. I'll move on, though.
Yeah, probably a good idea. That's ridiculous to say I give somebody a leash. Free speech, brother. People can say whatever they want, and they can believe whatever they want. And I don't think there's any... We had two gay women who fought in the co-main event. They sat on the stage with Sean Strickland. They could give a what Sean Strickland thinks, or what he says, or what his beliefs are, or what his opinions are. You know what I mean?
So that was recently, but here's Dana White 10 years ago, and the tone is different when he is, I believe it was Matt, was he talking about Matt Mitrione, some things that were said that he was not at all down with? This is 10 years ago.
I know that there was a lot of talk, free Mitrione and all this stuff with the fans, and it's freedom of speech and all this stuff. That's absolutely ridiculous. Work at any company anywhere in America and go out and say ignorant, stupid stuff publicly. Even on top of that, say it publicly in a big, place where people can go read it or hear it publicly and see what happens to you. And it's like, oh, we agree with what Mitrione said. Well, you can agree with what Mitrione said. If that was something that he really felt strongly about, and he said, I want to speak up, I want to be heard about this because I don't believe, and I don't disagree with everything that he said. So it's not that he didn't have a point. It was how he said it. The extra things that he said. And if he was standing in front of a panel, okay, and he was going up to speak on this subject, he wouldn't have said the things that he said, and he would have said it differently. There's a way to voice your opinion without sounding like a bigot. You know what I mean? And he came off sounding like a complete jackass and a bigot. And that kind of stuff isn't going to be tolerated. The other thing was, I used the F word, and we're not talking about here. And I grew up in the 80s. Used to use that word all the time. So when that happened, I'm the furthest thing. I know I might look like one. The big bald dude from the UFC probably is a homophobe. I'm the furthest thing from it.
Pablo?
Yeah, first off, that sort of musical bed underneath is what I want Barkley to get from the kids today. Like, there's a beat about to drop. I want that sort of thematic effort in proving that Barkley is actually an all-time great athlete. But about Dana White, it's very funny to me. Right? Like, there's a unifying theory of Dana White that Ariel walked me through, because Ariel was the guy interviewing Matt Mitrione. He was the guy interviewing Dana White, asking about punishments. And that's the sort of thing that Dana White was doing when he wanted to sell UFC to the mainstream before 2016. And why did that matter? It's because they didn't have a deal with Disney and ESPN yet. Dana White knew exactly what the households across America were wanting from the UFC, which is to say, clean it up. We don't say that stuff here. That stuff is bigoted. It's awful. Like, respectable society won't allow that. And then 2016 happens, fill in the giant blank as to what happened in 2016. But you know what happened. Dana White spoke at the Republican National Convention. And then suddenly he's realizing, wait a minute, there's a massive pivot I can make here for the same reason I was punishing this speech before, which is money. which is profit. And so it's remarkable. Look, it's remarkable that Dana White, because of that leash back and forth, by the way, which was incredible. And Ariel does a great job on my show breaking down why it was a masterclass in basically vivisecting a journalist. Dana White, off of that, has become, I would say, the foremost champion of free speech, certainly in American sports, and it's on the path to being the foremost champion of free speech in American life, right? Dana White is saying, free speech, comma, brother. That's the only policy I have. Now, was it the case 10 years ago, 5 years ago? Not in that same way. But now, Dan, all I'm pointing out is that I don't think it's plausible to be the foremost free speech absolutist in America when the thing you're really protecting is money. And ask Ariel Helwani about how his freedom of speech was treated by Dana White as the counterpoint to what it is that Dana White really cares about when it comes to protecting his business.
We have less than a minute left, but for those who have not seen or heard the podcast, tell us the best of what Ariel told you, because I've heard some of the stories, and I don't think he's told them all publicly. It was really bad. I experienced some of them with him at ESPN. It was really bad. He has not said everything that happened there.
No. Look, the point here is very simple. It's not about canceling Dana White. It's not about moralizing. It's simply about free speech, in theory, is about not just protecting the speech that makes you money. It's about protecting the speech that makes you uncomfortable. And so Ariel Helwani not only breaks stories about, Brock Lesnar is going to come back and fight, he breaks stories about fighter pay, about treatment of the employees who are not employees or independent contractors at the UFC. And so when Ariel Helwani left ESPN, he got a text from an unknown number that he says was Dana White. And it was mocking. It was, I told you I was going to get rid of you. It's about how he got banned from covering UFC for 48 hours famously. And Dana White told him, Lorenzo Fertitta, he put a bullet in your head. It's about Ariel saying he fully believes that, and he said this on the show, that if he walked out of our studio and got hit by a bus, that Dana White would cheer. And so it's about this thing that we see now, right? Forget stick to sports. That's over. Now it's say whatever you want, as long as I could plausibly claim that I'm in favor of freedom when really I'm in favor of making money. It's a story about America and our politics now, and Dana White happens to be the center of a Venn diagram that is both very funny when you see what he used to be, but also actually ridiculous to suggest genuine when it comes to his policy and his standards.
Pablo Torre finds out all of the interesting things. He is following his curiosities to the end of the earth.
Then what?
Pablo Torre finds out
The
is
Earth's
the
round,
name
Dan.
of the podcast.
My favorite part of that segment was Greg's lone contribution of hitting the microphone was with his thermos.
Yes, mine too.
How'd that turn out?
Thanks, Greg.